Okay, so let's start the lecture. So we were discussing about the user authentication, how user authenticates itself to log into the system. We discussed different ways of authentication, like the, the most important method, which is generally used by the, the users to authenticate themselves to log into the system, like for example password authentication, which is used to authenticate a user for login to the system. So whenever any user want to get an access to a system or want to authenticate itself, it uses a password. So we discuss uh, different things in the password. Like for example, we discussed that if any password is actually going to be given or going to be assigned by the user, how the user assigns that password. So what are the different schemes or different policies are defined to secure the password so that in a taker or an intruder cannot get that password and use that password to authenticate itself as if it is a legitimate user or actual user. So how we can do this? We can do this with the help of different methods, like as we discussed that we can define number of policies for that, for the password. For example, if any of the user tries more than some attempts, like for example 3 or more than that, then he will not get an access to the password. And or for example we can define some other policies for that, for example if any password is given a particular time limit, for example, after that time that password would be renewed by the user. So if a user is having uh, the previous version of the password, that he cannot intruder has the previous version of the password, he cannot enter into the system, because the password may be changed by the user. So in this way, the intruder, if he gets the password, so first he tried the method to guess the password as we are use using to guess the password whenever we forget the password. So in the same way, the user is also trying some methods like that to guess for the particular password. So he guesses the password using different methods, like the method that he applies, that he has a list of different password, and from that list one by one, uh, each password is applied to the password field, and then if he tries, if any of the password matches to the password field, then he can be able to enter into the system. So this type of method that is applied or that is used by the intruder or the attacker is called as a type of dictionary attack, where he has the list of different passwords, and he applies that password on each um, on the password in the password field. And if he gets an access of the particular password and matches that particular password to the password that is given by the user, so in this way he can use that with the help of password authentication. So in the same way, uh, the password can be protected in other way, like for example using different methods like securing password. As we discuss how we can secure the password, so we can secure the password using some authentication methods or some integrity methods or some encryption methods. So as we apply different data integrity, data encryption to the data. So in the same way, we can also apply the encryption to the password, or we can also maintain the integrity of the data using different hash functions. So in this way we can secure the password using the methods, like we apply the methods for the for any data. So like for example, for encryption we can apply some symmetric algorithms or asymmetric algorithms, or for integrity we can apply, or for authentication we can apply some methods like hashing functions, like for example MD4 and MD5. So these algorithms can be applied to the data, to the password. So whenever this information is attached to the field of the password, so they form a password line that is called the salt. So we can define uh, uh, for the salt for each password. So it will also define the algorithm that is used to encrypt the data, and the algorithm that is used to maintain the integrity into the data. So in this way we can apply different methods for password authentication. And then we have some other types of methods also, like for example, if we are using the password, uh, and then there's another method of authentication. Authenticating a user is the biometrics, for example, where it uses a fingerprints or thumbprint to authenticate itself. So you can use a biometrics for your computer, for your laptops, as it is used by other systems like ATMs. So you can also do that for your system as well, for your laptop, for your computer, for your mobile. So you can also use this as an authentication method, so that you can only uh, authenticate, or you can only access your system or your laptop, mobile, or computer. So in this way, this is as it is a secure method in the sense that the only the user which has the particular thumbprint and the biometrics fingerprints, he can access to the particular system. And it is the advantage is like that. And this could be uh, uh, although this is the advantage to that. For example, there's also possibility that some of the user has access to the system, and then after accessing to the system, and he has the possibility that he may forgot to log out of the system, and then it's way where an intruder may be possible to access that system and then use the system. So in this way he can do this with the help of, even if we are using the biometrics, so that he can also access to the system. So to protect the system from such type of takes, like for example, so we can provide a method like, once for example, if a user is going to access the system through some biometrics, for example, or some thumbprints, for example, then the system or the application will use some password or some pin code, for example, to access particular application, for example. So in this way we can verify particular user twice by using, before it was verified using a thumbprint or fingerprint or biometrics, and then it is authenticating as it is a as it is a legitimate user. So it is authenticating itself using a password or using a pin code, for example. Or we can use a biometric separate for the system to log into the system, or separate for the application to access for the particular application. So in this way we can use a combination of the biometrics, like for example we can use a multiple times authentication, or we can use a mix of different methods like biometrics and plus pin code, or for example verify the application with the with some method, and verify the system with some method. So in this way we can use a combination of that. So we have some other type of authentication method also, which is called as a token based authentication method, where we are using like some USB or smart card, for example, which can scan into the system, and after scanning to the system it can ask for the particular pin for that, and then he can be able to access the system. Like in the way example is given here, or this figure further explain this type of method which is used to access to the system, where a particular card is used in the system, which is scanning into the card, and then you enter the pin for that, and then you can access to the system. So in this way you can use this for a computer system, laptop, or some other system. You can also use that for some other systems as well, or for the, you can say, applications for the network, or for the system you are going to access, you are for the system you are going to authenticate yourself. So these are the different ways which can be used by for the authentication, which provide the methods of authentication, where we can use these methods to authenticate a user. So if any intruder, for example, tries to get any of the method to get an access to the system, like he can be able to get the password and then authenticate itself to the user, or for example he can use if someone is log into the system to the through biometrics, and he forgot to log out of the system, and then he can use the system in this way, or he can log into the system in this way, or for example he can use some other methods, or he can use some combination of methods to log in to the system. So in order to secure the user uh, for using these authentication systems, so we have to secure the data as well, using encryption methods, using integrity methods, so that the pass, if any of the any change has been identified in the, if any change has been occurred by the user, or if any change has been done by the user or intruder, it can be identified by the user or by the system. And if and any of the, and we have to secure the data some other means, like providing the secrecy to the data, confidentially to the data. So if we can encrypt the data, and uh, without a proper means or proper key, the intruder or the attacker cannot get an access to the data. So these were the methods we discussed so far. Now we have some other methods which are called as distributed authentication, where we apply these methods uh, to provide the authentication to the different users, like uh, they are used in a distributed format. For example, it can be used for each authentication. There would be different authentication for every application. For example, some of the application may use a user, for example, password for authentication. Some of the application may use a biometrics for authentication, and some of the application may use a combination of that. So this figure further explain about this authentication method. Like for example, we have there's a username and password is saved in the database, for example, for an application or for different users which are on some system or on server, for example. and there are the different rules are defined for that. And these different rules, for example, which define that which user is going to access particular system or particular user. We use this method. So every application has its own method of accessing. For example, we have the database application in the system. We have some other applications in the system. Like for example, there's a possibility some type of server is installed in the system. So we define different rules for each application which is in the system. So in this way, this method is called as a distributed method, where we have different applications, and each application has its own username and password, and its own rules are defined for the particular application to access the particular system or to access particular application. So in this way, this type of method, which is called as a single sign-on method, where every application has its own way of authenticating itself. Here, uh, the advantage of using is that, for example, they are the different applications which are using same uh, same password and same username and password. You just sign on a single application, a single system, then you can access to the multiple applications. So in this way, we say that this type of method can be used to sign on multiple applications or multiple sites using only once authentication. You authenticate yourself once, and then you can log into any application like a database or other application or other server. So they are the center authorization policies are used. Means, for example, there's a central system is used, which defines a username and password, and some authorization policies that, for example, that user can access the system, that user cannot access the system. The password which is defined for the application will follow different policies, and different policies are assigned to that. So these different policies are assigned to that, and they are used by the different applications. So in this way, you are using a distributed type of you can say login system, where you use the password, username, password once you log into the system, and you can also use that with other applications as well. So like here are the different applications, and you can use that with these different applications. So in the same way, we have some other type of method, like that is called as a Microsoft Passport. So that was launched in 1999, and for example, it was handling about more than 200 million accounts, and it performs about 3.5 authentication each month, and it is used with applications like Hotmail, MSN Messenger, and some other applications. So they are using this type of authentication system, and then it was used by different application. Now, how that system is working, like for example, uh, the passport, this application works like that. It starts with the user signing, and user can sign in with a particular some for example, some password or something like that, or some other means like for example, biometrics or some other means. So generally it uses a password for authenticating itself to the server. and then for example it is accessing from you can say a web browser, for example, and then it redirects to the server from where it can get an access for a particular web application. And then the application prompts the user to give an email address and the password, and then if it checks that email address and the password into the system. So if it matches to the email and address and password for that, then it will you can say encrypts uh, with the information about the user that is in the form of the different cookies for that particular user, and then it could be redirected to that particular website. So in this way, the user, if any user want to access particular website, so then it will be asked by website for particular for email and add a password. Then it will check that email and password in its server, for example, and if it contains that email and password, then it can give an access to that user for that particular application or for that particular website. So then if he has that password or the you can say username and password in the website, and then he can be able to access to the system, then it will be decrypted using authentication method by a passport manager here. And then it will request for the particular web application or web page which is requested by the user or which is requested by the server, for example. So in this way, this method is called as a passport login method. Why it is called is a passport login method? Because it whenever it tries to log into the system, it asks for the particular user and information about the user, like email and the password. So after asking the email and password, so it checks that is email and password in the database, and once it finds that email and password, then it gets you can say information about the user using the cookies which are used by the particular user or particular web browser which contains the information about the user, and then he will be allowed or he will be redirected to the particular website or web application to access particular application. So in this way, he can be able to get the particular application to get the particular web page from a user. Like here, this is further explained in the figure as well. Like for example, there's a user who want to access a particular web page, so it will send a request to the particular web server. Then it will send particular information related to the particular user to the web browser, and then it will authenticate itself and send the information like an email and password to the server, and then it server verifies that if it is in the database, then the user will be redirected to the web server, and now using a web manager or passport manager, so it can now access the particular web page from a web application or website, and then it will be dispatched to the user. So in this way, this scheme, this method is working to authenticate the user, and that is used by the different applications, and that is used by the different messengers to authenticate a user, that if a user is actually uh, you can say legitimate user which is accessing the particular web application which is accessing a particular website. So this is called as a passport login. We have some other methods like which is called as a uh, trusted intermediaries, where we are using some intermediary on which the users are trusting, for example, and we are using that to authenticate the users, for example, like for example, the certification authorities or key distribution centers. So we can use that uh, for the key, for example, to be sent it to the user, for example. For example, in case of semantic encryption, we can use a key distribution center, which can send keys to the users, symmetric private keys, for example, or the session keys, for example, to the users, so that they can communicate with each other, they can exchange the messages with each other. So that is, we say that it's a type of connection that is used by using a key distribution center, which can send the information about the different users. Uh, so, uh, so we have some other method like a public key, which uses a public key crypto system, which can use a certification authority, which is responsible to send the keys to the users, for example. So why we are using such type of trusted authorities or trusted intermediaries? Because if we send directly the public key or the private key to the user, so it's possible that the intruder get that key uh, and sends its own key to the user or to the receiver, for example. So in this way, the attacker, the intruder can masquerade itself that if it is a legitimate user which is sending the keys to other system or to other user. So that's why it is important in here in the sense that we require some sort of certification authorities or some sort of key distribution centers, so that they can send the information or they can send the data to the users securely, uh, and the users can trust that the particular data is being coming from legitimate user, or the particular data is been coming from legitimate authority. So in this way, we have different types of users which are using that particular application, or which are using that particular, you can say, uh, particular data using some trusted authority, and they can receive the keys from these trusted authorities. And the advantage of using that is that we can ensure that the data is coming from a legitimate user, or the data is coming from a legitimate authority. So if you have any question up to now, you can ask.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so we have some trusted authority like key distribution center, which is used to send the keys. For example, here you can see in the figure as well. There's a key distribution center, and which is sending the keys to di- different users. For example, so here you can have a trusted authority which can send different keys to different users, for example. So if for example, if you directly send the keys, the users can directly send the keys to each other, for example, then it's a possibility that there could be an intruder which can use that key, or which can access that key and can send its own key. And so in this way we can not trust like that. So because it's possible that the intruder may be in between them, and he can get original key and sends its own key to the user. And when it tries to encrypt that, so it will use that key, and then when it gets the data from the user, and then he can decrypt that data with the key that he has sent it to the user. So in this way, it's possible that the intruder or the taker can get that key. So in order to protect the system from such type of attacks, so we can use a key distribution centers, which can be trusted by the users, and they can receive the keys from the key distribution center. And then they are the trusted, although because they are the trusted authorities, and that's why the users can press these keys and can use these keys to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. So in this way, we have different methods used for the uh, distribution of keys. So there's a still possibility that if we are using the key distribution center, and then there's a possibility that there's a user is actually may use that key, for example, before that it receives that key, and it can reuse that key that is distributed by the key distribution center. So to fix that problem, we can assign some nouns to the data, to the key, for example. And we know about the nouns. It defines the time limit about the particular key, for example, that after this time limit, the key will be key need to be reissued by the key distribution center, and the previous key will not be used. So it's possibility that intruder will get that key and use that key to encrypt the messages. So in this way, we can protect the system from such type of attacks by using a proper methods like announs, where a user can renew its key, or the other key will be sent it to the user with different time stamps, with different time field, with different validity of the particular key, for example. So it's sent it with that. So it uses a particular you can say nouns with a key, and when it uses a particular nouns with a key, so then it can send the data to the user. Then it can send the data, uh, send the key to other user, so that he can get that key. And once he get that key by a key distribution center, so it also defines a time feed for that, time stamp for that, which defines that how much time that key would be can be used. So after that time, it can renew other key for the particular system or particular user, for example. So it will helps to protect the key from an attacker to reuse the same key to send the data to other user. So in this way, we can protect the system from such type of attacks. And then we have the method like that is used for distributing the key, that is called a ticket, for example, which contains some information about the user, that for example, identification of the user, or the key that is used by the user, for example, validity of that key. So that whole information called as a ticket, for example, and that also contains the time limit for that, that how much time the particular key will be used. So that also defines for that, and that is used by the particular user, for example. So if any of the user is using that, so it may use the particular ticket for that, for the key, for example, and then he will be able to authenticate itself that he is a legitimate user, and he's going to access the data, and he's going to send the data to other user. So in this way, we can use such type of methods to authenticate the user to other user. For example, as we are discussing that we are using the symmetric method, and we are using the asymmetric method. If we are using the symmetric method, it will use a same key, so that would be distributed by the key distribution center. So the advantage of using the key distribution center, we discussed that in the key distributions, if the key distribution center is used, then the user will be trusting that center or key distribution center, and then he can have a trust that the key is not coming from an attacker or intruder. The key is coming from a legitimate authority. A legitimate user uh, is providing the key to him to send the data to other user. So in this way, he can authenticate itself. And then we have